EU Cyber Skills, an educational series focused on the European cybersecurity skills and certifications, highlighting training programs, skills frameworks, and career success stories.
Welcome to Skills and Certification on Cybersec TV, where we explore the latest trends in cybersecurity certification programs. Today we are joined by Brian Correia, a cybersecurity certification expert, to discuss the growing importance of certification, especially within critical sectors. Hello, Brian. How are you?
Hey, doing well. How are you doing today?
That's great. So, Brian, why are cybersecurity certifications becoming a key requirement for companies operating in critical sectors? And what are the benefits do they offer in terms of risk management and trust?
Sure. So certifications, there's never a full solution across the board. I'm always a big advocate of, hey, work experience, certifications, things along those lines do matter. Why certifications matter in our industry is, think of it as no different than other industries, such as accounting, law, being a doctor. What it is it's a skills validation of what you have learned. So, and it could be tied into a particular work role, whether that's a forensics, being a pen tester, it could be a whole bunch of things. But what it is doing is it's validating. So in some ways, think of it as, like, for example, for a doctor. It doesn't mean that you're the best doctor in the world, doesn't mean you're the worst doctor in the world, but you always want to go to a doctor that has a license. And the reason why is because it's validated that that doctor has a certain level of skills. That's what certifications really bring to the table. Now, you may say to yourself, why haven't we seen licenses in our industry? And there's a couple reasons why, but a lot of it has to come down to there's multiple roles in our industry. There's not just like you're a cybersecurity professional, right? It could come down to, are you dealing with, and we'll go back to some of the topics we talked about, are you a security architect? Are you a risk manager? Down to, are you a pen tester? Are you a forensics analyst? So no one certification is really the solution for anything. Also, in turn, this industry is a very fast-moving industry. So certifications have kind of really taken on that role, but what you're seeing is more and more every day, it's used as a validation of that workforce, but as a validation of making sure that you're keeping up with best practices that are out there within the industry. So, you know, just the same reason of why you would hire, for example, an accountant with a CPA. Why do you have a driver's license? Why do you have a law degree? You're just starting to see that being applied over here in the cybersecurity. And the reason why this is becoming a much bigger deal here recently is you have to remember this industry is still a very young industry compared to all the other ones that I've been talking about. So as you're seeing as time's going on, now the industry is becoming more standardized and it's kind of maturing more over time. And so that's why you're seeing some of the great efforts like the NIST2, SEC here in the US, DORA is maybe another really good example over there in Europe of really good initiatives to kind of really help kind of elevate cybersecurity.
How does the NIS2 directive impact the demand of cybersecurity certifications in the EU? And what challenges do companies face in obtaining compliances certifications?
So NIS2 was built to be a standard within Europe to make sure that all critical infrastructure organizations have standards that are built into it. So that could be anything from, some of the obvious would be like a utility, for example, like a water treatment plant, electricity. But then it also could cover, you know, such things as like healthcare, for example. It covers tech. It covers quite a bit, you know, anything like retail, for example, with giving out medications. It affects all those various industries. So it's any organization that has 50 or more employees. It is not where they're located, is where they're doing business. So that covers the 27 nations of the EU. Where certifications kind of fit into that mix is being able to go back to, so part of the idea is you're going back to ANISA, which is the organization, and kind of giving them a report of what is your security practices. So some of that could be, for example, so one of the big areas is how do you handle an incident? Do you have that prepared beforehand? As strange as it sounds in our industry all the time, there isn't a pre-plan on that, like even down to who's in charge. But in our area with certifications, it's now validating the workforce can handle all the different things that are kind of required to keep things protected. So it all goes back to that of, do you have a workforce that's been validated of their skills, right? And part of that is no different than what you do see in other industries, because ultimately the board is responsible of these corporations, right? Now, no board is going to have people that are cybersecurity experts. But the idea is that board can be confident, the shareholders can be confident, the EU, the ANISAs can be confident in that workforce to be able to handle the threats that are out there.
Yeah, you're right. You just talk about the board management that should be. Should management board members obtain cybersecurity certifications to fulfill their obligations, for example, in NIS2?
It's a very interesting question, and it's a little bit, I will confess, a little bit controversial, simply because, like, for example, here in the United States, the Security and Exchange Commission, which in some ways the best way to explain that is Wall Street, had talked about making that a requirement of boards. At the end of the day, the decision was made not to. And so the argument was that boards aren't necessarily filled up with people with expertise in accounting, for example. They're not filled with expertise in other industries. They hire people and they have auditors that do that for them. Now, some of the argument is that ultimately the board is responsible. And so one of the areas it's been discussed, and we'll see if that happens, is, like, for example, financial results. No board is going in and actually coming up with the financial results, but they hire auditors to validate their internal practices. So when a board member of the board signs off on that, they could be confident that there's been multiple checks and balances. That is something that you're starting to hear more and more every day in the world of cybersecurity. I will admit there is a decent amount of people that would love to see boards having people with cybersecurity experience. There's that side, and then there's the other side of, hey, boards don't typically have experts in other fields. But the question is what are the checks and balances to know that when a board does sign off on something, they could be confident in what they're signing off on? So I believe you are going to see that more and more every day. And, skills validation is more than just necessarily something that goes back to, say, like the EU government in the case of NIS2. You're also seeing in cases of, like, cyber insurance, right? You're seeing it in multiple different areas. It could be audits that I need to do for my clients. It may be audits I need to do for my partners. There's multiple areas that now you're starting to see more and more of that skills validation. So if I want to get a better cyber insurance policy, I need to be able to validate. So as funny as it sounds, cyber insurance policies were put together very quickly. I think these insurance companies thought it was going to be a huge, like they were going to make tons of money off of it, until they realized they had to start cashing out on some of the things that actually happen in our industry. So what that's now meant is, over time, the insurance companies have gotten smarter about it and started asking a lot more requirements, just like the EU. So all of that is tied back into protecting the citizens of those countries, right? So ultimately, why does the EU care about the security practices of a tech firm, a retail, a utility? And it all comes down to protecting its citizens and making sure that bad things don't happen.
Well, that's great. We hope actually to see the board members with some kind of certification and expertise in cybersecurity, not just because it's required by law, but it's because also they need to be involved in the decisions that need to be taken.
Yeah, I mean, what I can tell you is when that was proposed here in the United States, as you can imagine, there was massive lobbyists that came in to fight that requirement. As you can imagine, being a board member of a company like Amazon or a Walt Disney company, or just go down the list, is quite a prestigious position to have, right? And so, as funny as it sounds, having one of those positions being somebody with a cybersecurity background, I mean, it would have been great in our industry because there would have been a whole bunch of people suddenly who I would consider friends of some major corporations sitting on the board. But I will admit there has been a lot of pushback on that, whether it's right or wrong. But that's what we saw here in the United States. I could see if it's going to succeed, I could see where it would succeed better in Europe, if I ever saw that happening.
So thank you, Brian, for sharing your insights on the importance of cybersecurity certifications. I hope to see you soon next time.
Hey, well, thank you so much for having me today.
And for you all, I hope to see you back in another episode of Cybersecurity Skills and Certifications on Cybersec TV.